great to be here today. I'm Melanie Drecksel, as she said. I'm with USDA Rural Development. I'm in our Mount Vernon office, so not too far away. Years and years and years ago, I used to work across the street with Bill Bonson and others over there, so this is an area I have a little familiarity with. So today I'm going to talk about our value-added producer grant. I don't know if you recognize these folks here. Some of you might. They were a recipient of one of our value-added grants last year, Twin Brook Creamery, and they make bottled milk on their farm. So they have a great project going there. So today we're going to talk about generally the value-added program, who are eligible applicants, what kind of projects are eligible, and how you can use the money. So kind of the basics so you can figure out if this is a program that might be helpful for you. That just tells you where you can find all the details of the law that authorizes this. This year we have a cap of $75,000 on the planning grant and $200,000 on the working capital grant. It's a 50-50 match, so that means you need to come up with the other half of if you're applying for a $50,000 grant, then you need to come up with $50,000 of match. We will go over what can be considered match. One of the things that can be considered is the value of your raw commodity. So that's it can go a long way towards fulfilling the 50% requirement. You need to complete your grant in 36 months. So there's a time limit on how long you have to do the project. So the whole purpose of this program is to help agricultural producers to earn more money, basically, by taking their raw commodity and turning it into something that will sell for more money than the raw commodity, and thus they make more money. So of course that means your cost of making that needs to be low enough that you're actually making money on it. So the planning grant, if you haven't already been doing this sort of activity, you might want to look at a planning grant to help you determine, will I make money from turning my milk into cheese or whatever. So the goal is to also expand markets for people who are already producing some sort of value-added commodity product. So we have some funding categories where there are reserved funds. 10% is reserved for beginning farmers and socially disadvantaged farmers or ranchers, and 10% is reserved for mid-tier value chains. And we will talk about what those are in a minute. There's also some scoring priorities. So in addition to funds being reserved for certain groups, there's also some scoring points that you get. So even if you don't end up getting money from those reserve funds, you can still earn a few extra points if you're a beginning farmer or rancher, so that means less than 10 years in farming. Socially disadvantaged farmers or ranchers, and that would be 51% ownership by women or minorities. So a lot of times we see family farms basically set up an LLC or some kind of entity, and the wives own 51%, which is okay, and then they get the points there. Small and medium-sized family farms, and that's to be medium-sized, you have to have less than $1 million in gross revenues. Farmer or rancher co-ops, and mid-tier value chains. So everyone always asks, what's a mid-tier value chain? And it's hard to explain, and it's still it gets a little confusing for me as well. It's a network of interconnected people from the farmer through the end user. So the goal, though, is still that the farmer be the folks who benefit the most, not say the processor or the people in the middle. We want to make sure the farmer is going to be earning more money. Participants can be and the ag producers, ag groups, co-ops, and they need to own and produce more than 50% of the raw commodity. So they can buy some of it from other sources, but more than 50% needs to be produced by the people involved in the application. And they need to own that product through the whole process. From production through, oh no, I'm sorry, this is an exception to the rule. In the mid-tier value chain, they can, they don't have to own it through the whole process. For all others, you have to own that product through the whole process. So if you're growing berries and making jam, and you're contracting out the jam making aspect of it to someone who has a processing facility, you still have to retain ownership while it's at the processor. So, yes.
So does the mid-tier value chain have to be one business entity?
No, it can be several, and there's a kind of a slide here that shows that. So it needs to always involve ag producers. We can't ever leave those out. But it can also involve processors, marketers, warehouse owners, distributors, etc. So everyone along that chain to the consumer. So here's an example. So we have farmers. We've got to always have farmers involved who are producing at least 51% of the commodity. Then they market, are going to make cheese in this example. So they could buy some of the milk from someone else, but the people involved in the application need to be doing 51%. And then they're going to eventually market that to the consumer. So we have people involved along the way who are going to process the milk into the cheese and then transport the milk to the school, and then the school, in this case example, is buying it for the school kids. So it gets a little complicated. This is one that is the most complicated. If you're not involved in a mid-tier value chain, it's a lot easier. This is a little funding history of the program, how much money we've received over the years. This year we're doing, you'll see there's no fiscal year 13. That's because we were a little delayed in getting the announcement out, so it turned out to be fiscal year 14 before the notice of funding availability came out. And we don't know how much money we're getting for fiscal year 14, so we're doing fiscal years 13 and 14 together. So we have $10.5 million from fiscal year 13. We don't know how much we're getting for fiscal year 14 because they have not passed the appropriations bill yet. But it looks like they're moving forward on that, so we hope to know soon. So instead of doing 2 in 1 year, we're just doing 1. This shows how many applications were received over that time period and how many were funded versus unfunded. The quality of the application is really important. We're going to do some workshops in January where we get into the application itself. Today I'm going to talk about the program generally, but not in all the details of the filling out the application. A lot of times people, the application has to be complete. So if you leave out one form, your application is rejected because it isn't complete. So that they're very strict in this program. And a lot of our programs, we'd pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, you forgot this form, can you get it in? But in this program, because it's a nationwide competition, we don't do that, because everybody in the whole nation's got to be treated the same, and so the cutoff date is the cutoff date, and you need to have all of the application materials together. I don't know if any of you have been to Bellwood. You might know Dory. I just was there recently. They finished their value-added project recently, and had to go back on the weekend to sample the product. They couldn't do it while I was working, but I went back last weekend and did a little Christmas shopping in their gift shop and did a little sampling, and it's good stuff. So we're going to talk about some of the basic eligibility requirements now. Applicant type. You can't have multiple grants going at one time. So if you've got a planning grant, for instance, you need to wrap that up before you apply for a working capital grant. So this is key to remember. What is an agricultural producer? It's an individual or an entity that is engaged in the production of an ag commodity, or that has the legal right to harvest an ag commodity, and that is going to add value to that commodity. And they can either directly engage where they're really involved in the farm, or they can be a little more distant where they hire people, but they're still have ownership and financial control of the operation. There are 4 eligible applicant types. There are independent producers, and we're going to talk about each one to tell you what this means for each one. There are agricultural producer groups, farmer or rancher co-ops, and majority-controlled producer-based businesses. Most people who apply fall into the independent producer category. And that's an individual or an entity, so your family farm that's incorporated would be considered an independent producer. That is owned and controlled by ag producers that are directly engaged in the production of the ag commodity. An independent producer can also be a steering committee of independent producers who are planning to form a legal entity that meets the requirements. They can also be a harvester. For instance, a fisherman or a logger is considered an ag producer. And we have done some grants with fishermen who are smoking their fish, selling smoked fish. An ag producer group is a membership organization. Typically it's a nonprofit that represents ag producers and operates on a mission that works on the behalf of ag independent producers. So they're like a service provider to farmers, such as an ABC would fall under that category.
Or the Northwest Cider Association.
Yes, yeah, and I think there are some examples. Corn Growers Association, Soybean Alliance. There's a lot of groups. The Washington Wine Commission is an example, and they received a grant for marketing expansion. So the majority of the membership needs to meet the definition of ag producer. So we're still helping farmers. Here is the idea. And the board of directors, the majority of the board of directors need to be independent producers. Then we have farmer rancher co-ops, and that's a business that's formed as a cooperative. Majority-controlled producer-based businesses. That would be a business where the majority of the financial and voting interest belongs to independent producers. And there's a cap on how much of the money from this program can be spent on that type, and it's 10%. We don't get many applicants from this category. So all four of those types need to produce more than 50% of the raw commodity that's going to be used, and then own the product from the raw state throughout the process, except for the mid-tier value chains. And then they need to be U.S. citizens or legally admitted permanent residents, and if it's an entity, 51% need to be citizens. So there sometimes, we get some questions about like a CSA. That's where they sell produce to customers, and they might be getting produce from other folks as well. So for them to apply and be eligible, they have to produce a majority of each of the raw commodities that they're going to be using in the project. So just for the project, they might have other stuff that's not part of the project, but for what they're applying for, it has to be 51% or over 50%. Producer groups, co-ops, and majority-controlled businesses have to show that they are entering an emerging market as a result of the proposed project. This requirement doesn't apply to independent producers, though. And an emerging market is where there's a new or developing or a geographic market that is new to the applicant. So they're getting into a new area. And they can't have already been working with that group for more than 2 years. So they could have been working with them for a year and a half, but not more than 2. Okay, so product eligibility. The idea here is to add value, expand your customer base, and that a greater portion of the revenue is going to be returned to the producer as a result of this value-added process. So again, making more money. There are 5 different methodologies that can be used to add value. So you can change the physical state. So if you turn the milk into cheese, you've changed the physical state. You can produce it in a manner that enhances the value of the commodity. We'll talk about this a bit more. Product segregation, farm or ranch-based renewable energy, and locally produced ag food product. So, changing physical state. This is the most common and the easiest to understand. We turn milk into cheese or raspberries into jam, that sort of thing. Produced in a manner that enhances the value. Organic is a good example of this. Organic food sells for a higher price than non-organic. So, based on that higher price, you've enhanced the value. Free range is another example. If you raise your chickens free range, it sells more for more. Product segregation, and this is where you're somehow physically separating the product based on some attribute of it. For example, GMO corn is separated from the non-GMO corn and sold separately. So you're separating a certain type of product from the rest of it. Farm or ranch-based renewable energy, and this is for if it will be used on the farm, renewable energy that will be used on farm. So, for example, dairy manure into methane We also have an energy grant program that was more typically used for this sort of thing. Locally produced agricultural food product. There's a big emphasis these days on locally grown food, and this is to capture that. And this is a food product that's sold within 400 miles of where it was grown or raised, or within the same state. And you can get, some points for this in addition to, whatever else you're doing. So it could be 2. It's not one or the other of these. It could be 2. You could be doing locally produced food and changing the physical state. So they aren't exclusive. So applicants need to show that as a result of doing this process, they're going to increase their customer base, which is usually pretty easy. If you're just selling a raw commodity, you might have, 1 or 2 customers buying it, a bulk processor. But if you're making, jam or something and you're selling to more, retail stores or different places, you're going to end up with having more customers. And then as a result of the project, that you're going to have more revenue. So you need to crunch the numbers and figure out, are you really going to have more revenue? And of course, you probably wouldn't do it if you weren't. So you need to make that decision as to, are you going to make more money by doing this project? We just said that, didn't we? Purpose and use of funds. So there's 2 types of grants. We're going to talk about that and the use of funds. We have planning grant and working capital. So on the planning grant, the funds are used to pay a third-party consultant, not yourself, but a third party, to develop a feasibility plan, marketing study, and business plan to see if it's going to work. Are you going to make more money? Is it going to pay for itself? And then we have a working capital grant to pay for project costs for processing or marketing the value-added product. Well, wait, there are 3 types of working capital applications. The first kind is a request of $50,000 or more for market expansion. Only independent producer applicants can apply for market expansion projects. And proposing, here, they don't have to have a feasibility study.
So that should actually be 50,000 or less then, right?
50,000 or more. Well, this is market expansion. They need to have been doing it for 2 years. Oh, and they don't need a feasibility study if they've been doing it for 2 years. I think these should have been linked together instead of separate. Request of $50,000 or more for emerging markets, and this would be all applicant types, and they have to provide a third-party feasibility study if they haven't been doing it for 2 years. I think that's the distinction here. And a simplified application requesting less than $50,000. They don't have. Are these all the same?
No. So this one is the simplified is the one where you don't have to have feasibility for a business plan. You just have to state in your narrative, kind of prove out what you're.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and this one says you do have to have a mark.
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking it said the same thing there. I'll fix that. Okay, so if it's less than 50,000, you get kind of a break on the application process by not needing to do the feasibility study. or the business plan. So you would use your own records for this sort of thing and your own planning. So how can funds be used? Eligible activities that can be paid for through the grant is the cost of labor, processing, packaging, labeling, supplies, buying up to 49% of the raw commodity from someone else, advertising and promotion, and financial and accounting systems. So it covers a pretty wide range of things. What it does not cover, though, would be any construction costs, equipment, vehicles. No, it can't be used to pay for the actual production, or harvesting or delivery of the raw commodity, or engineering and architectural design.
Melanie, if you're leasing space or any kind of deck or equipment, is that a permissible expense?
Yes, a lease can be included. Okay, matching funds. So you need to come up with a 50% match, and you can only spend that on eligible purposes. So so when we define what is the project, it has to be an eligible project, and the cost for that eligible project are only what we consider. So so you spend basically your money first. When you submit, to get reimbursed for your expenses, you submit a draw request, and you have to have paid for half of whatever you're submitting. So if you spent $100,000, you need to have paid for $50,000 on your own. But you'll see, it doesn't actually have to be cash. It could be the value of the commodity. So it doesn't have to be cash. It can be what we call in kind, but you still demonstrate that 50% of that has come from you or other eligible sources. So the match can be cash, a loan, line of credit. It can be the applicant or family member's time. So the value of their work if they're working. But you need to show us how you've calculated that. So you need to pay them basically what the going rate is for that kind of work. It could be third-party cash or third-party in-kind contributions. Sometimes people know folks who are willing to donate some time to them to help them. We see this more often in feasibility studies, or they know someone who's an accountant who will help them crunch numbers and help them put together a feasibility study. And then the value of the raw commodity for working capital is a big ticket item there. And you tell us how you've calculated. With milk, it's fairly easy. Cow milk, I have someone who's applying for goat milk, and that's turning out to be not so easy. But if you have cow milk, you can show what it's being, how much is Dairy Gold, buying it for. You need to put together a work plan and budget to show what you're going to do and when you're going to do it and how much it's going to cost. The time frame, the sources and uses of funds, and your grant period needs to start you need to start within 90 days of being selected for the grant, and then end within 36 months. We're estimating that they will be selected in April, but as these things go, that will probably turn into May or June. So if you're thinking of applying, you probably wouldn't be actually ready to receive funds and start the project until August, September. It's a kind of a lengthy process. Let's see, so there's a few other eligibility requirements. Meet the grant period. Your application needs to complete, as I mentioned. You can't have more than one going at once, and then we score your application, and to select them. And an evaluation criteria is used to evaluate the applications. And so we look at your application materials and to look at the nature of the project, and you get a score of 0 to 30 for that part. Qualifications of project personnel. You know, a lot of times if you're the farmer and you've had, you know, years of experience farming, talk about your experience. You know, that's you're the qualified person, but you need to just explain that and talk about it. If you're hiring someone, you need to talk about their qualifications. Commitments and support, and that means if you're providing a cash contribution for your match, we need a bank statement that shows you have that money available. If you're getting in-kind support from a third party and they're going to donate some of their time to your project, we need a letter statement signed by them saying they're going to do that. So, and then your work plan and budget. Did you do a good job on that? And then any priority points that you might qualify for. Okay. Any questions? Or can Jeff has been through this. Do you all know Jeff? Jeff is with NABC, and they have, you know, worked with people on applications, and they do a great job helping them get it all put together. So he might know more than I do about the program.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I think I've prepared about 3 of them, and 4 of them landed one. And one of them we didn't get after several work because we didn't have 2 correct pieces of paper in there. So it's real important to, you know, be reading the material and everything that's asked. And USDA provides good material. It tends to be a little overwhelming because the application format has all of the different categories that she mentioned in there for applicants are all mentioned in there. So there's, you know, X% of it's not going to
apply
pertain to you.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of just weed through. You'll have another set of eyes to look at it for you. And I know that Melissa Moeller, Mr. Meadow Farms got a $50,000 less grant, and she pretty much self-propelled with the whole thing and got it done. So she might be, if anybody knows her, might be a really good resource just to talk to her about her experience and what, how she went through it, what her methodology was. Who was that? Melissa Moeller from Misty Meadow Farms.
And she's doing a great job on her draw request too, because then, you know, after, if you're successful, then, you know, you go through this process of you requesting the funds and documenting, you know, because you got to document, you know, that means invoices and receipts and that sort of thing for your expenses. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Anything else?
You know, so other than that, you know, I would say, you know, understanding what you can't use as expenses, and so everybody thinks value added. Well, it should be like paying for equipment, that kind of thing. Well, it doesn't do that, but it does. You know, if you, and also thinking about like the one category of organic or free range or whatever. If whatever expenses you have that are producing the agricultural commodity, those don't be what is your expenses that are providing, you know, the value added portion. So something, you know, like for organic, using that's a real challenge because if all of your expenses are really the production side, but not necessarily in the value add side, there's really not a whole lot of there to write an application for. So you might be able to write the application for. I was in the process of preparing one for one of our clients, and he was doing medicinal herbs and such, and so it was a real struggle to find enough expenses to really make it kind of worth going through the effort to do it. But you know, he had drying of herbs, and he had propane, and a few of those things, marketing costs, distribution, transportation, those would all work. But you know, any of the expenses that go into actually, growing and harvesting the herbs aren't applicable. And also, if you are a family owner, you can't, your expenses in terms of labor don't apply to,
Not for your family members.
not for family members.
So if you're paying your kids, if your kids are working, you can't you can't use their labor expenses as match.
Yeah. So those are qualified.
But if you're hiring someone else who's not your family member, you can include that.
After they're above the age 18?
Even if they're above the age of 18.
Or even your labor, you can't, I guess Melanie says you can use it as in kind.
Not in kind. There's 25%.
Oh, if that goes into your 25%. Okay, so if the family members go to the 25%, it's going to either be the commodity or family in kind. But in terms of just claiming for expenses on the grant award, family members or owners, don't qualify.
Yeah, for cash. Yeah, but in kind it does work up to 25%. So you have to still show. Would be something similar to a timesheet to show how many hours you worked and how much the value of your work is, and then you submit that with your draw request.
So it can be a little challenging, but yeah, it definitely is worth going through and mapping out and putting the projections down, because it provides an immense value to those who are able to do a good application and get that award. It's really a really big help. And I think it really applies to kind of expanding markets, because if you have marketing costs, you're developing a website, hiring a contractor, doing branding, packaging, all that kind of stuff it pays for. So if you're doing a value-added product, it can be a really big help.
I think it's a great program. I really like this program, and I love seeing what people are doing with their, on their farms. This is a website you can go to where you can find all of the application materials, and there's an application toolkit. Instruct what we call a notice of funding availability, or NOFA, and then you can. The deadline for this round is February 24th, 2014. So you still got time. Don't wait till the last minute. Like Joe said, it is complicated. It's not horribly complicated, but there's a lot of stuff, a lot of forms and things you got to think about. And you're planning, because you got to figure out for your own self, what am I going to do, and does it make sense?
Yeah, and I might add just, one of the things, obviously you're going to strengthen your proposal if you can document the things in your proposal. If you have a way of documenting the numbers, you have a business plan, or, you'll be asked for, most current financial statements, those kinds of things, and bank statements for matching funds. But also, if part of your expansion is engaging with market partners, getting letters of support from those market partners, whoever they might be, or people who are involved in your project, also really help strengthen, and lend credibility to the proposal. Yes,
that's very important. That helps a lot if you can show there's someone out there who's willing to buy your product. That helps a lot. So there is my contact information. And if you want to learn more, we are having 2 workshops in January. January 8th in Burlington, and then January 14th in Chehalis. We're doing it at the Skagit Farm Supply in Burlington. And we're going to go over kind of these basics, but then after that we're going to get into more of the application materials. And so we'll go this far and then take a break, and then we'll get out those application materials and look at those and try to give you some pointers on how to fill out the application, and so that it's so to improve your chances of success, because we really like to see people be successful. And I tell you, it hurts us not as much as it hurts you, I won't say that. But if it's a great application and there's a couple forms missing, that really, that really is sad because, you know, we see this great project and then it gets kicked out, you know, because something was missing. So.
So you said you had 1 of 4 successful. One was kicked out with 2 pieces of paper missing.
Yeah.
What were the other 2?
I think the first one I did, this is one of the challenges when you're thinking about you're in this year, especially if it's a multi-year project. In the work plan and timelines, you know, because you might be 15 months out or whatever, and I had erroneous dates in there, my dates didn't match up, you know, I don't know, I got feedback that that was one of the issues, I don't know if that was all the issues. And it's also competitive, you know, you're getting scored against, you know, 400 or 500, you know, applicants nationally. So yeah, I think, you know, that probably, it was the missing piece of paper and erroneous dates were, you know, and it's a heartbreak, because depending on the size and scale or scope of what you're applying for, I mean, I put as much as 120 to 150 hours in an application. Yeah.
I tell you, the one I've only actually looked at one of yours, and it was excellent, and did a great job on it. So.
So it's one of the things to think about, you know, depending on you know, kind of, so, you know, the famous Western philosopher, Dirty Harry Callahan, who said a man's got to know his limitations. Think about, you know, that 50,000 or less, you know, as maybe a good entry point to give it a whirl, because that would, you know, not be as intensive as having to do the other, you know, the more larger application.